The Valorian Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had conquered 17 star systems and destroyed anyone who tried to fight back. Their ships numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and their weapons could turn entire planets into burning rocks. The Emperor, High Sovereign Kelthos, sat on his throne made of black stone and believed that nothing in the universe could challenge his power. Commander. Zethus was one of the Emperor's most trusted scouts. He had helped conquer 40 planets during his career. He knew how to break the spirit of alien species. He knew how to make them kneel before the Empire. When his sensors detected a small blue planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy, he expected another easy victory. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. The humans who lived there had only recently learned how to travel between stars. They had a few small stations orbiting their moon and some mining ships working on nearby planets. By Valorian standards, they were like children playing with toys. They were not worth worrying about. Zethus brought his cruiser out of hyperspace and began scanning the planet. He saw their cities, their oceans, their green forests. He saw their primitive defense satellites and their tiny fleet of ships. He almost felt sorry for them. They had no idea what was coming, but then something strange happened. His scanning equipment stopped working. Static filled his screens. Warning lights flashed across his control panels, and then a voice spoke through his communication system. It was a human voice, calm and clear, speaking perfect Valorian language. "This is Admiral Catherine Cole of the United Earth Defense Initiative. You have entered restricted space. Please state your intentions." Zethus was surprised but not worried. He had dealt with brave aliens before. They always thought they could negotiate or threaten their way out of conquest. They were always wrong. He activated his transmission array and sent the standard Imperial Declaration. He told the humans that their planet now belonged to the Valorian Empire. He told them that they would surrender immediately or face complete destruction. He told them that resistance was pointless. There was a long pause. Zethus imagined the humans panicking, running through their corridors, trying to figure out how to respond to the doom that had arrived at their doorstep. Then Admiral Cole spoke again. Her voice had not changed. She did not sound afraid or angry or desperate. She sounded patient, like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "We will give you one warning," she said. "Stay away from Earth. Do not return. Do not send others. Leave now, and we will consider this matter closed." Zethus laughed out loud. His crew joined him, their harsh voices filling the bridge. A warning? These primitive creatures were giving a warning to the Valorian Empire. It was the funniest thing he had heard in years. He ordered his weapons officer to charge the primary cannons. He would fire a single shot at one of their moon bases. Just a demonstration, just enough to show them what real power looked like. The weapons officer pressed the firing. Controls, nothing happened. Zethus frowned and ordered him to try again. The officer pressed the controls repeatedly, but the weapons remained silent. Then the lights on the bridge flickered. Then they went out completely. Every system on the ship died at once. The engines stopped. Life support failed. The artificial gravity that kept them standing on the floor disappeared, and Zethus found himself floating in darkness. Emergency lights came on after a few seconds, casting everything in a dim red glow. Zethus grabbed a console to steady himself and stared at his crew. They looked terrified. They had never experienced anything like this. "What is happening?" Zethus demanded. No one had an answer. Through the viewport, Zethus could see his cruiser drifting slowly, helplessly, like a dead fish floating in water. They were moving toward the cold emptiness of deep space. Without power, they would freeze to death in a matter of hours. Then he saw something approaching. It was a human shuttle, small and simple and completely unremarkable. It looked like something a child might draw. It had no visible weapons, no shields, nothing that should have allowed it to approach a Valorian warship. But the warship was not a warship anymore. It was a tomb waiting to happen. The shuttle docked with the cruiser. Zethus heard the airlock cycling and grabbed a weapon from a storage locker. Whatever came through that door, he would face it with dignity. The door opened. A single human walked through. He was young, probably no more than 30 years by human counting. He wore a simple uniform with a name tag that read LT, Danny Marsh, which he carried no weapons. He did not look afraid. Danny Marsh floated through the zero-gravity environment until he was face-to-face with Commander Zethus. The human was small, barely reaching the Valorian's chest. His skin was soft. His bones were fragile. By every measure, he should have been terrified of the massive alien warrior in front of him. He smiled instead. "Commander Zethus," Danny said. "I have a message for your Emperor." He held out a small data chip. Zethus stared at it like it was a poisonous insect. "What is this?" Zethus growled. "Coordinates for the edge of Valorian space. A recommended route home." "And a copy of the warning Admiral Cole gave you?" Danny's smile faded. "We do not want war. We do not want to hurt anyone. We just want to be left alone. Please make sure your Emperor understands this." Zethus wanted to grab this tiny creature and break him in half. He wanted to show him what Valorian strength meant. But his ship was dead. His weapons were useless. His crew was floating helplessly around him. He had no power here, and they both knew it. He took the data chip. Danny Marsh nodded politely, like he was finishing a business meeting. "Your emergency systems will restore in 10 minutes. You will have enough power to return home. We have disabled your weapons permanently, but your engines and life support will function normally." He turned and floated back toward the airlock. "How?" Zethus called after him. "How did you do this?" Danny paused at the doorway. He looked back at the commander with an expression that might have been pity. "We are not what we appear to be, Commander. Please tell your Emperor that Earth is not worth the cost. There are easier conquests in the galaxy. Forget you ever found us." And he was gone. The airlock closed. The shuttle detached and drifted away toward that small blue planet that had just humiliated the greatest military force in the galaxy. 10 minutes later, just as Danny had promised, the emergency power returned. Zethus ordered an immediate retreat. His cruiser limped back toward Valorian space, its weapons destroyed, its crew shaken to their core. When Zethus finally arrived home and delivered his report to the Emperor, he told the truth. He told them about the warning, about the impossible technology, about the young human who had walked onto his ship without fear. The Emperor listened carefully, and when Zethus finished, High Sovereign Kelthos made a decision that would change everything. He decided the humans were bluffing. He decided to teach them a lesson they would never forget. He was wrong. High Sovereign Kelthos sat on his throne and listened to Commander Zethus tell his story. The throne room was filled with the most powerful beings in the Valorian Empire. Admirals who commanded fleets of thousands, generals who had crushed rebellions across a dozen worlds, advisors who had served 3 generations of emperors. They all listened in silence as Zethus described what had happened near the blue planet called Earth. When the commander finished speaking, no one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the palace's power systems. Then Admiral Voreth stepped forward. He was old, older than anyone else in the room except the Emperor himself. His scales were covered in scars from 100 battles. He had personally led the conquest of 7 planets and had never failed. "The humans are bluffing," Voreth said. His voice was rough and confident. "They used some kind of localized weapon to disable a single ship. A trick. Nothing more. They are trying to frighten us because they know they cannot fight us." Other voices joined in. Admiral Desha, a younger commander known for her careful planning, urged caution. "We know nothing about these creatures," she said. Their warning was specific. "Perhaps we should learn more before we commit our forces." General Kreth, commander of the ground forces, laughed at her words. "Learn more? They are primitives who barely crawl across their own solar system. What is there to learn? We crush them, we take their resources, and we move on to the next conquest." The arguments continued for hours. Some wanted immediate attack. Others wanted more information. A few, very quietly, suggested that maybe the humans should simply be left alone. Emperor Kelthos listened to all of them. He watched his commanders argue and debate and threaten each other. And when he had heard enough, He raised one massive clawed hand. Silence fell immediately. "The Valorian Empire does not retreat," Kelthos said. His voice filled the chamber like thunder. "We do not listen to warnings from species we could crush beneath our feet. We do not show weakness to primitives who should be kneeling before us." He stood from his throne. He was enormous, nearly 3 times the height of a human, and his golden eyes burned with ancient fury. "We will send the Third Fleet, 40,000 ships. Admiral Voreth will command them personally, and we will teach these humans the cost of their arrogance."
Oh.
No one argued. No one dared. The Third Fleet departed 2 cycles later. It was the largest military force the Empire had sent anywhere in over 100 years. 40,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single blast. Millions of Valorian soldiers ready to conquer and occupy. Supply ships carrying enough resources to sustain a war that could last for years. Admiral Voreth stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Conquest, and watched the stars blur as the fleet entered hyperspace. He had no doubt about the outcome. He had crushed rebellions that threatened the very heart of the Empire. He had broken civilizations that had fought back with everything they had. Humans would be no different. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Voreth ordered his ships into attack formation, a spreading wave of destruction that would sweep across the system and leave nothing but ashes behind. His communication officer reported an incoming transmission. Voreth smiled and ordered it played throughout the bridge. Admiral Catherine Cole's voice filled the air. She sounded exactly as Commander Zethus had described. Calm, patient, almost sad. "You were warned," she said. "This outcome is your choice, not ours. We take no pleasure in what comes next." Voreth laughed loudly. "Humans," he said to his crew, "they talk like they have already won. Let us show them what defeat truly looks like." He ordered all weapons to charge. 40,000 ships began powering up their cannons, their missiles, their planet-killing bombs. The amount of firepower being prepared would have been enough to destroy 100 Earths. Nothing happened. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, Voreth noticed something strange. The lights on his bridge were flickering. His officers were looking at their consoles with confused expressions. "Admiral," one of them said, "I am losing contact with the other ships." "Admiral," another said, "our weapons are not responding." "Admiral," a third said, his voice shaking, "our hull is." "The hull is." Voreth turned to look through the main viewport. What he saw made his blood freeze. The ships around him were coming apart. Not exploding, not burning, just ... dissolving. Metal that had been forged in the hottest fires was simply falling away, breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, until nothing remained but dust. He watched in horror as vessel after vessel disintegrated. 40,000 ships, the pride of the Valorian Empire, were being erased from existence without a single weapon being fired against them. The Eternal Conquest began to shake. Voreth grabbed his command chair as pieces of his own ship started peeling away. He could hear his crew screaming. He could hear metal grinding and tearing. He could see stars appearing through holes in the hull where solid walls had been moments before. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" No one answered. There was no one left to answer. On Earth, in a command center buried deep beneath a mountain, Admiral Catherine Cole watched the sensor data update on her screens. Dr. Samuel Price stood beside her, his face pale. "It is done," he said quietly. "How many?" Cole asked.
All of them.
"Every ship. We tried to target only the vessels and save the crews, but..." He shook his head. "The technology is not precise enough. We could not separate them." Cole closed her eyes. Millions of beings had just died because their emperor was too proud to listen. Millions of families on distant worlds would soon learn that their loved ones were never coming home. She felt sick. She felt tired. She felt old, but she also knew that she had no choice. The Valorians had come to destroy humanity. They had brought enough firepower to burn Earth to a cinder. If she had done nothing, every man, woman, and child on her planet would be dead. Send a message to their emperor, she said finally. Same warning as before. This is their last chance. If they come again, we will not stop at their fleet. We will go to their homeworld. We will end their empire entirely. Dr. Price nodded and began preparing the transmission. Cole stared at her screens, watching the last traces of the Valorian Third Fleet fade into nothing. 40,000 ships reduced to atoms. The greatest military disaster in galactic history, accomplished in less than 3 minutes. She hoped the Emperor would listen this time. She did not think he would, but she had to try. Because despite everything, despite the death and the destruction and the terrible weight of what she had just done, Admiral Catherine Cole still believed that peace was possible. She still believed that understanding could grow between species, even species as different as humans and Valorians. She was an optimist. It was probably her greatest weakness, but it was also the reason she kept fighting. The news spread across the Valorian Empire like wildfire. 40,000 ships destroyed. Millions of soldiers dead. Admiral Vorith, the legendary conqueror, erased from existence along with his entire fleet. And the enemy had not lost a single vessel. The enemy had not even fired a weapon on 100 worlds. Valorians gathered around information screens and listened in stunned silence. Many refused to believe it. They said it was propaganda, lies spread by enemies of the Empire. But as more details emerged, the surviving sensor data from the fleet's final moments was analyzed and shared. The truth became impossible to deny. The humans had done the impossible. They had destroyed the mightiest fleet ever assembled without any visible effort at all. Hi. Sovereign Kelthos locked himself in his private chambers for 3 days after receiving the news. No one was allowed to enter. No one knew what he was doing. Some whispered that he was planning revenge. Others whispered that he was going mad. On planets that had been conquered by the Empire, subject species began to whisper different things. They whispered about rebellion. They whispered about freedom. If the humans could defeat the Valorians so easily, maybe the Empire was not as powerful as everyone believed. Maybe the time had come to fight back. The Emperor knew he needed answers. He summoned his spy master, a creature named Vex, who had served the throne for longer than anyone could remember. Vex was small for a Valorian, but his mind was sharper than any blade. He knew secrets that could destroy empires. He had agents on every civilized world in the galaxy. Vex entered the Emperor's chambers and found Kelthos standing at a window, staring out at the city below. The Emperor looked older than Vex had ever seen him. His scales had lost their shine. His shoulders were bent like he was carrying a heavy weight. "Tell me about the humans," Kelthos said without turning around. "Tell me everything." I'd spent the past 3 days gathering information. He had contacted agents across the galaxy. He had captured human traitors and questioned them carefully. He had pieced together a picture that troubled him deeply. "The humans discovered something," Vex said. "A long time ago, before they even developed space travel, their scientists found a layer of reality beneath everything we can see and touch. They call it the substrate." Kelthos turned slowly. "Explain." "Everything in the universe follows rules," Vex said. "Matter behaves in certain ways. Energy flows according to certain patterns. Every species, including ours, has developed technology that works within these rules. We build better engines, stronger weapons, faster ships, but we always work within the system." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The humans learn to change the rules themselves. They can reach into the foundation of reality and rewrite it. They can make matter dissolve. They can make energy vanish. They can make the laws of physics work differently in certain areas of space." Kelthos stared at him. "That is not possible." "I thought so too, Sovereign. But the evidence is clear. When our fleet attacked, the humans simply told the universe that our ships did not exist anymore, and the universe obeyed." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. Vex could see the thoughts moving behind his golden eyes. Fear, anger, confusion, and something else. Something that might have been grudging respect. "How long have they had this ability?" Kelthos asked. We believe they discovered the substrate approximately 400 years ago. They have been developing their understanding ever since. 400 years. The Emperor's voice was hollow. They could have conquered the galaxy. They could have erased every other species and ruled everything alone. Yes, sovereign. Why did they not? Vex had asked himself the same question. The answer still surprised him. They chose not to. Their history is filled with violence. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times. Wars, weapons, hatred between their own tribes. When they discovered the substrate, they were still recovering from a conflict that killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. He moved closer to the Emperor, lowering his voice. The humans looked at what they had become and decided to change. They built a society based on cooperation instead of conquest. They developed their substrate technology for defense only. They swore to never use it to attack or dominate others. We are supposed to believe this? Kelthos growled. We are supposed to trust the word of creatures who just killed millions of our people. They gave us 2 warnings. Sovereign. They asked us to leave. We chose not to listen. Vex spread his hands. The humans have a philosophy they call proportional response. They will not attack unless attacked. They will not conquer unless threatened. But when threatened, they will eliminate the threat completely. The Emperor walked to his throne and sat down heavily. He looked exhausted. He looked defeated. But Vex knew better than to underestimate Kelthos. The old ruler had survived plots and rebellions and assassination attempts for centuries. He would not give up easily. What do they want? Kelthos asked finally. To be left alone. Nothing more. Nothing less. And if we leave them alone? What then? Our empire looks weak. Our subjects will rebel. Other powers will see an opportunity to strike at us. Vex nodded slowly. This was the real problem. The humans did not want to destroy the Valorian Empire. But by defeating them so completely, they had wounded the Empire in ways that might prove fatal. Fear and respect were the foundations of imperial power. Without them, everything would crumble. Perhaps, Vex said carefully, it is time to consider options beyond war. Kelthos looked at him sharply. What do you mean? The humans do not wish to be our enemies. They have made that clear. But they might be willing to be. Something else? You suggest we make peace with them? After what they did? I suggest we talk to them, Sovereign. Find out what they truly want. Explore possibilities that do not end with our destruction. Vex paused. The alternative is to attack again, and I do not believe we would survive another attempt. The Emperor sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the sun was setting over the capital city, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, across the vast emptiness of space, a small blue planet waited to see what the Valorians would do next. Finally, Kelthos spoke. Send a message to Earth. Tell them we wish to talk. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to avenge his fallen soldiers, to prove that the Empire was still strong. But he was old enough to know when a war could not be won, and wise enough to know that survival sometimes required setting aside pride. The message was sent that night. 3 days later, a response arrived. The humans agreed to meet. Her name was Grace Murphy, and she was not what anyone expected. The Valorians had imagined that humanity would send a warrior to meet them. Someone tall and strong, covered in weapons, radiating the same terrible power that had destroyed their fleet. They expected threats and demands and the arrogance of victory. Instead, they got a 43-year-old woman with graying hair and kind eyes who stepped off her shuttle, carrying nothing but a small bag of personal belongings. Grace had spent her entire adult life studying alien species. She had learned 17 languages and had written books about the cultures of a dozen civilizations. She understood that peace was not built through shows of strength. It was built through understanding, through patience, through the slow and difficult work of finding common ground. The Valorians who escorted her through the Imperial Palace were nervous. They kept their weapons ready and watched her every movement. To them, she was the representative of the species that had just killed millions of their people. She was dangerous beyond anything they could imagine. Grace understood their fear. She did not blame them for it. She simply walked calmly through the obsidian corridors, admiring the architecture, asking polite questions about the history of certain statues and carvings. Her guards did not know how to respond to someone so ordinary. The throne room was enormous. Black stone walls stretched up toward a ceiling that disappeared into shadow. Torches burned in iron holders, casting flickering light across the floor. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single massive crystal, sat High Sovereign Kelthos. He was bigger than Grace had expected. Even sitting down, he towered over her. His scales were dark gray, almost black, and his golden eyes seemed to glow in the torchlight. He radiated power and age and barely contained fury. Grace walked across the long room until she stood before the throne. She did not kneel. She did not bow. She simply stood there, a small human woman facing the ruler of an empire that spanned 17 star systems. "You destroyed 40,000 of my ships," Kelthos said. His voice echoed through the chamber like the rumble of distant thunder. "Yes," Grace said. "We did. You killed millions of my soldiers. We did that too." Kelthos leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the arms of his throne. "And you expect me to simply accept this? To make peace with creatures who committed such slaughter?" Grace was quiet for a moment. She had prepared for this question. She had practiced her answer 100 times. But now, standing here, facing this ancient and angry being, she found that her prepared words did not seem right. "Sovereign," she said finally, "may I tell you a story?" Kelthos blinked. Whatever he had expected her to say, it was not that. After a long pause, he nodded. 300 years ago, Grace said, my people fought a war among ourselves. It was the worst war in our history. Millions died. Cities were destroyed. We created weapons that could poison the land for generations. When it ended, we looked at what we had done and felt nothing but shame. She began walking slowly, not toward the throne, but along the edge of the room. Looking at the battle scenes carved into the walls, it decided to change. Not because we were forced to, but because we could not live with ourselves if we stayed the same. We took all the brilliance we had used for destruction and turned it toward building something better. We created the technology that protects Earth today, and we swore that we would never use it to conquer or dominate. She turned to face Kelthos again. When your commander Zethus arrived at our world, we gave him a warning. We asked him to leave. When he ignored the warning, we disabled his ship but let him and his crew live. When you sent your fleet, we warned you again. We told you exactly what would happen if you attacked. You attacked anyway. Her voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the softness. We take no pride in what we did, Sovereign. Every death weighs on us. But we will not apologize for defending ourselves. We did not start this conflict. We asked only to be left alone. You refused. Kelthos was silent. His golden eyes studied her, searching for weakness, for fear, for anything he could use against her. He found nothing but quiet resolve. "Why are you here?" he asked finally. "You have the power to destroy my entire empire. You could wipe out my species and take everything we have built. Why send a diplomat instead of a fleet?" Grace smiled sadly. "Because we are not like you, Sovereign. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your resources. We do not want to rule over anyone. We emerged from violence, yes. But we have spent centuries trying to become something better." She walked closer to the throne, close enough that the guards shifted nervously. "We believe that all thinking beings have value. We believe that cooperation makes everyone stronger. We believe that peace, real peace, is possible even between species as different as yours and mine." "You are naive," Kelthos said. "Perhaps, but we are also patient, and we are willing to try." Grace reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. The guards immediately raised their weapons, but she held up her hand calmly. "It is only a communication unit. I would like to show you something." After a tense moment, Kelthos nodded. Grace activated the device, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a planet, a beautiful world of blue oceans and green forests, orbited by two small moons. Cities sparkled on its surface like jewels. "This is Terrani 7, Grace said. 50 years ago, a plague struck this world. It killed 30% of the population before it was stopped. The Therenians had no cure. They sent out desperate calls for help, but no one answered." She changed the image to show human ships landing on the planet's surface. We answered. "We sent doctors and scientists and medicine. We worked alongside the Therenians for 3 years, until the plague was completely eliminated. We asked for nothing in return. When the work was done, we left." Another image appeared. Then another. Planet after planet, crisis after crisis, humans arriving to help and then departing without claiming territory or resources. "This is who we are, Sovereign. Not conquerors. Not destroyers, helpers, builders, partners." Grace deactivated the device and looked up at Kelthos. "We could be partners with you as well. If you are willing to try." The throne room was completely silent. Even the guards had stopped moving, frozen by the weight of the moment. Kelthos stared at this small human woman who had walked into the heart of his empire without fear. She represented the species that had humiliated him more completely than anyone in 3,000 years. By every measure of Valorian culture, he should hate her. But as he looked into her calm, kind eyes, he felt something he had not expected. He felt hope. "How would this work?" he asked slowly. "This partnership you speak of?" Grace smiled, and for the first time since she had arrived on Valori's prime, she allowed herself to relax. "That," she said, "is what we are here to figure out. Together." The negotiations would take months. There would be arguments and setbacks and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But on that day in that throne room, something important changed. For the first time in their long and bloody history, the Valorian Empire began to consider a future that did not depend on conquest. And it started with a conversation between an ancient emperor and a human. A woman who believed that peace was possible. The negotiations lasted for 14 months. There were days when everything seemed hopeless. The Valorians wanted guarantees that humanity would never use their substrate technology against the Empire. The humans wanted assurances that no more fleets would be sent toward Earth. Both sides had centuries of distrust to overcome, and there were moments when the talks came close to collapsing entirely. But Grace Murphy never gave up. She spent long nights studying Valorian history and culture, learning what mattered to them, understanding their fears and their hopes. She found common ground in unexpected places. She discovered that Valorians valued honor above almost everything else. She helped the Emperor see that peace could be honorable too. Kelthos struggled with the process. His advisors were divided. Some urged him to sign the treaty, arguing that the Empire could not survive another conflict with humanity. Others demanded that he reject any agreement and continue preparing for war, even if it meant waiting for generations to find a weakness in human defenses. In the end, Kelthos made the decision alone. He was old, older than any emperor who had come before him, and he had begun to think about legacy. Did he want to be remembered as the ruler who destroyed the Empire through pride? Or as the one who had the courage to choose a new path? The Treaty of Neutral Stars was signed on a space station orbiting a nameless planet halfway between Earth and Valorous. Prime, delegations from both species, gathered in a great hall decorated with the flags of both civilizations. Cameras broadcast the ceremony across the galaxy. Grace Murphy signed for humanity. High Sovereign Kelthos signed for the Empire. When their hands met in the traditional gesture of agreement, the audience erupted in applause. Some of them were weeping. The treaty established clear boundaries around Earth's solar system that no Valorian vessel would cross without permission. It created channels for trade and communication between the two civilizations. It set up procedures for resolving disputes peacefully. But the most surprising part of the treaty was the Mutual Defense Clause. Both humanity and the Valorian Empire agreed to come to each other's aid if either was attacked by an outside force. Many Valorians were shocked by this provision. Why would humans want to protect the empire that had tried to destroy them? Why would the Empire accept help from the species that had humiliated them? Grace explained it simply during a ceremony on Valori's Prime. She stood before a crowd of thousands. Her voice amplified so that everyone could hear. The galaxy is vast and dangerous, she said. There are powers out there that neither humanity nor the Valorian Empire has met yet. Some of them may be hostile. Some of them may be beyond what either of us could face alone. By standing together, we make each other stronger. We prove that former enemies can become allies. We show the universe that cooperation is possible. The years that followed were not easy. Old hatreds do not disappear overnight. There were incidents on both sides, misunderstandings that nearly sparked new conflicts. But each time, cooler heads prevailed. Each time, the treaty held. Admiral Catherine Cole retired 2 years after the treaty was signed. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for a war that she hoped would never come. Now that peace had been achieved, she found that she did not know what to do with herself. She decided to teach. She joined the faculty of the Earth Defense Academy and spent her remaining years training young officers who would never know what it was like to fear the stars. She told them stories about the crisis, about the impossible choices she had faced, about the weight of ordering the destruction of 40,000 ships. Never forget what we are capable of, she told her students. Never forget the terrible power we hold. And never, ever use it unless you have no other choice. Dr. Samuel Price continued his research into the substrate. He pushed the boundaries of human understanding, discovering new applications that could heal diseases, repair environmental damage, even extend human lifespans. He refused to develop any more weapons, despite pressure from some military officials. We have enough power to destroy the galaxy, he told them. What we need now is the wisdom to build it up instead. He died peacefully at the age of 94, surrounded by former students who had become colleagues, and colleagues who had become family. His funeral was attended by representatives from 17 different species, including a delegation from the Valorian Empire, Danny Marsh. The young pilot who had delivered humanity's first warning to Commander Zethus rose through the ranks over the following decades. He became a captain, then an admiral, then the commander of the first joint expedition, a mission to explore the galactic core using combined human and Valorian technology. The expedition discovered wonders beyond imagination. New civilizations, ancient ruins, cosmic phenomena that defied explanation. Danny sent reports back to Earth describing everything they found, his writing filled with the same sense of wonder he had felt as a young man looking up at the stars. Grace Murphy served as ambassador to Valori's Prime for 15 years. She and Kelthos never became friends exactly, but they developed a mutual respect that deepened over time. She learned to appreciate his dry humor and his surprising curiosity about human culture. He learned to value her patience and her unwavering belief in the possibility of understanding between species. On her last day as ambassador, Kelthos summoned her to the throne room. He was very old now, his scales faded and his movements slow, but his golden eyes were still sharp. "Have something for you," he said. He held out a small crystal, perfectly clear, with something glowing faintly at its center. "What is it?" Grace asked, recording. "The first transmission we received from your Admiral Cole, warning us to stay away from Earth. I kept it as a reminder of our defeat." He pressed the crystal into her hands. "Now, I give it to you as a reminder of how far we have come." Grace looked at the crystal, then at the ancient emperor who had once been her enemy. "Thank you," she said softly. Kelthos nodded. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "You were right," he said finally. "About everything. About peace being possible. About cooperation making us stronger. About former enemies becoming something more." He paused. "I did not believe you at first. I was too proud to set in the old ways. But you showed me a different path." Grace smiled. "We showed each other sovereign. That is how it should be." She left Valori's Prime that afternoon, carrying the crystal with her. She returned to Earth, where she spent her remaining years writing about her experiences and teaching young diplomats. The art of finding common ground and humanity continued as it always Had, building, learning, growing, reaching. For the stars with hands open in friendship rather than fists clenched for war. They had given the galaxy one warning. A simple request to be left alone. Now, decades later, they were no longer alone. They had partners. They had allies. They had friends among the stars. The universe was vast and full of mysteries. There would be challenges ahead, dangers that no one could predict. But humanity would face them together with their new allies, proving that even the deepest wounds could heal. And even the oldest enemies could find a way forward. Together, that was the lesson Grace Murphy taught throughout her long life. That was the truth that Admiral Cole had fought to protect. That was the future that Dr. Price had dreamed of, and Danny Marsh had helped to build. Not conquest. Not domination. Not the old ways of fear and violence. Something better. Something new. A dawn that had been earned through sacrifice and courage and the simple, stubborn belief that peace was worth fighting for. And as the sun set on another day across the galaxy, casting its light on human worlds and Valorian worlds alike, that belief continued to burn, bright and steady and eternal, like hope itself.